Hello and welcome back to the Wheel Talk podcast. My name is Abby Mickey. I'm here to talk about women's professional cycling with Loren Rowney.
G'day everyone. I'm back.
And Gracie Elvin.
Hey, always good to be here.
We've got the Europeans to talk about, some more contract news that came out last week. I want to mention Lael Wilcox because what an incredible accomplishment she achieved over the weekend. So yeah, let's dive into it. We talked last week about SD Worx and how the team is looking, and pretty much 10 minutes after I finished the newsletter and sent that out, they dropped the news that Marta Locke will join SD Worx Pro Time through 2027. So their first new signing apart from Anna van der Breggen coming back, and I think it's a great one. Marta Locke, she's been on Certeza WNT for a bit, and she's a really, really strong rider. And I think she'll be a great fit. I'm excited to see how that goes.
What sort of role do you think she'll be filling in? I mean, she's got a lot of potential. She's had some great results herself this year and obviously gets those opportunities on her current team. But do you think she could fill in the slot of someone like Christine Majoris that's leaving? Well, retiring, I should say, which is sad, but we'll get to that in a few weeks.
It's a great question. I'm not really sure what her role will be. She's got a lot of experience. I think that they're going to have a hard time of like finding a good place for her, but she's definitely really strong. So I think in terms of kind of slotting into a domestique role, she would be able to do that. But I think we will, at least for the first part of the year, see a lot less of her kind of attacking style that we're maybe used to seeing. But I think that the whole team is going to have a bit of an adjustment period in the beginning of the year because there are so many riders leaving the team. And so that will kind of benefit her a bit because she definitely won't be the only new rider coming into the team. There will be other riders that will have to find their footing within the team structure. So I think it'll be, in terms of strength though, like she could definitely be a strong domestique, but she's not had that much domestiquing for the last couple of years while she's been on Certeza at WNT. She will know how to do it though from like when she was on CCC Live with Marianne Vos. Like she would have spent a lot of time riding for Vos for those 2 years that she was there. So yeah, I think that once it comes to the later season races, we may see her attacking like she has the past couple of years, but for the beginning.
Yeah, and a 3-year contract.
I'm keen to see, what happens with a rider like her because, we've seen her strengths the last few years in the peloton, kind of in that second rung of riders that can do well, is strong, very aggressive, but doesn't necessarily get top results. So I'm keen to see what the SD Worx effect does with a talent like that and like how she comes out of their first round of training camps and what their special sauce is for someone like that. If she can jump up the next important level or if she just kind of, stays in that box, I guess, of where she's at now, because then she'll become that domestique. And maybe they realized they needed more of those kind of riders anyway because they've had so many leaders over the last few years.
Barbara Gurucci announced her extension with the team through 2026, so they still have her coming in, but currently there's only 10 riders signed to the team for next year. So there's still, in theory, 6 riders to be named, whether that's riders that are continuing like Chantal van der Broek-Black and Elena Cecchini are kind of the only 2 that we're not really sure if they are continuing with the team or leaving. But there should be a couple other new riders coming in. So I think it'll look like a much different team, which will either benefit or not Marta Locke. But you're right, Gracie, like she's grown so much the last couple years that I think that SD Worx Pro Time is such a sink or swim situation. It'll either be really great for her to be in a new environment and she'll continue to progress or not. And that's something that, we'll see. I wonder what Lannika Unikin is doing, actually. She's not really raced a ton.
Really have not mentioned her name much this year.
Wow, she's barely raced this year.
Yeah. I guess illness or something?
But her contract is up And I think I would have assumed that she would stay because she's been on Bulls Dolmans since she's been on the team since it was Bulls Dolmans in 2020. And yeah, through this year. So 5 years. But yeah, no word from her, and also not really much racing done this year, which doesn't bode well.
Maybe there'll be like a Dutch under 19 that gets signed as well. At some point, we might hear something like that.
For sure. Well, we'll talk about Europeans in just a second because there's a couple Dutch riders that are worth mentioning for the junior and U23 races. Speaking of extensions, Ricardo Bauernfeind and Antonia Niedermeyer both signed a 1-year extension with Canyon SRAM, which I think is unsurprising that the team is keeping them, given the success that they've had with the team mostly last year. But I was surprised that they've only signed them for 1 more year. I think I would have expected like at least a 2-year extension for the two of them.
Is it just me, or like I felt like in 2023 we were talking a lot more about them? Obviously, they both got 2 huge results in 2023. So and they just seem more present. But this year I felt like if you went off based off the 2023-2024 season, not underperformed, but just less notable in their performances.
Yeah, they're still performing well, and they're still, in that finale mix and helpful, especially when we're seeing Cassia in particular less isolated than she's ever been because she's got better teammates around her in those tougher situations. But you're right, like they haven't been, surprising us like they did last year in the way that they're riding. But I'm also surprised that they're not getting a longer contract. So there could be 2 possibilities for that. The team only offered them a 1-year contract, or they can also only ask for a 1-year contract because they would also like some flexibility in the next couple of years as to where they might land next, thinking if I get some good results, that's going to up my market value elsewhere. So you can use that as a bit of a bargaining tool as well as a rider. So it's not always in your best interest to sign a multi-year contract if you think that you'd like to move on, or you think that you're going to be worth more later. Obviously, it's a gamble though, because if you get a nice steady 2-3-year contract and then you have an injury or something comes up, then you've kind of got a guaranteed run for another couple of years. So yeah, I would be interested to see why they've only signed for 1 more year.
Do you think Neve Bradbury and how well she's doing? Say you're the agent of Bauernfeind or I was going to say Niedermeyer. We'd be thinking like last year, I was like, yeah, maybe they're kind of next in line to Cassia as the team is starting. They're a team that thinks towards the future, right? Because obviously they've got that generation team, and they see both teams as one team, not as a separate entity. So I guess with Neve Bradbury, we've always known that she was on the cusp of something, but this year really, like she's the next Cassia in that team for me, in a sense. So if you're the agent, maybe you're thinking, let's see how next year goes. And then you can either up your value within Canyon SRAM or look for opportunities elsewhere to become, I don't know, more of a leader potentially, or developing into more of a leader. Because if we look at Canyon, they've stuck with Cassia as the leader for years.
I mean, in terms of Niedermeyer, it might be like an age-related decision. She's only 21, so it's possible that she signed a 1-year and like fully hopes to stay with the team for longer than that, but will maybe be worth more in 1 year than she is now, and wouldn't want to sign a longer contract because of that. I think of the two of them, like they both have such different potential, really. Like Antonia Niedermeyer is such an incredible time trialist, and Bauernfeind is, well, they're both really, really strong climbers, but Bauernfeind is a lot more versatile as a rider, like in terms of helping Kasia or any of the other riders on the team. But I think, I mean, they're both relatively new to racing, like a layer of safety in place, both for the rider and for the team, to not tether them to a longer contract. But I mean, I think we've already discussed Neve Bradbury's contract extension through 2027. Like she's got a super long contract extension with the team, 3 more years with the team. And I mean, she's also pretty young, only 22, but they've really put a lot of faith into her, really, the last couple years, and really allowed her to grow into her strengths. It's been pretty cool. And I would hope to see the same thing from Niedermeyer, really, because she's such a talent and still so young.
I think, and Neve Bradbury just seems to fit into Canyon Schramm. Just seeing her around the team at the Tour de France Femme, you can see that it's a really good fit. And that team has always been about picking riders based on talent and potential, but also how well they gel within a team. They're not going to hire someone if they think that it won't work in that respect. And having spoken with some DSs, one in particular didn't think that was something that needed to be considered in this day and age because of how much riders are making, that a job should just be a job. But actually, I think when a team does gel really well and it works, then you see it on the road. And we're seeing that with Canyon Schramm, and we're seeing it with teams like Phoenix de Koenig.
I feel like we've talked about that before. Like that on the men's side, it is very much like a job, and it doesn't really matter if you get along with your colleagues, because it's your job to ride for them or not ride for them. But even then, like, even men's teams, I feel like work better if they are at least like getting along. I mean, if you have a rider who's off doing their own thing and pissing everyone off, it's never really gonna end in a result. And like very rarely, I guess, will end in a result. But on the women's side, we've talked about how much emotion comes into play in racing, and we're emotional beings, and it's always going to be more important for us to get along, just as important for us to get along as it is to, like, have a paycheck.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're right, Canyon Schramm just looks like they have a lot of fun. Yeah. And if you're talking about just us walking around at the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift, looking at like the Canyon Schramm bus versus the SC Works Pro Time bus.
Night and day. But even the staff, like, it was so nice to be around that bus, like on that last stage, while all the riders were at the stage watching Cassia get awarded her yellow jersey. All the staff were still at the bus, and they were already cracking open the beers and having a good time. And like a lot of that staff is still the staff from HTC High Road that became Specialized Lululemon. So they've been together for, over 10 years now, which is quite a long time to have that same core group. So that was very cool to witness.
FDJ keep rolling out the signings, but are yet to announce the one that we're all waiting for. But they did announce last week that Eglantine Reyer, who's another young rider, only 20, she's been on DSM for the last 2 years, and she will move to FDJ Suez for 2025-2026. What team are they building over there? I just want to know. I just want to know what their end goal is.
Well, wasn't it Matilda Reynolds that said she thinks the big signing is coming in December based off what brands usually do in terms of, is it marketing budget or something? Did you read that comment?
Can you imagine if we have to wait until December until we know?
I feel I don't know. I think it'll be like
after Worlds.
Yeah, if she wins the rainbow jersey, which she cannot, because like she just can't. But for the point's sake, she cannot. For the sake of the draft, she cannot win the Worlds.
Oh, well, also, I don't think that she's going to win. Who can beat Kopecky?
Well, yeah, I guess we can get into that. That's a good segue to the Europeans.
Wait, we're not done talking about transfers. Just a couple more. I'll just rattle them off really quick. Movistar added two more riders on top of the ones that we already discussed. Paula Ostis and Ana Victoria Magalhães, who we'll all remember from the Giro because she was on the attack almost every day. From Brazil, she was riding for B Pink at the time, and she was the rider who got caught super close to the line on the second stage that Balsamo won, that came down to a sprint. She was off the front solo for a long time and nearly made it. But she's signed to Movistar next year, which will be a very popular signing at only 23 and from a country that doesn't have a ton of support for their riders. I think I'm really excited to see how she progresses, and I think she'll fit into that team quite well. And Martina Fidanza is the latest signing to Visma Lease a Bike. So they also are continuing to slowly churn out their new roster after quite a few riders left the team this year or will be leaving the team because the season's not over. But Loren, you're right. Who can beat Lotte Kopecky at Worlds is a great segue into Kopecky just absolutely stomping the TT at the Europeans.
Yeah, clearly in form. If she beat Ellen van Dijk by, 44 seconds? And then Schweinberger, who was the bronze medalist at Worlds last year, was she?
And Europeans.
And Europeans. And so that's pretty impressive. It speaks volumes. It was a flat-ish TT because that region that they were racing around isn't, well, it can be hilly, but obviously opted for slightly easier courses. I have not looked into the Zurich course, but I see that Kopecky is down for the time trial. There's not that many. I think they've only got 10 competitors listed so far, but she will be doing it. And who knows, maybe Kopecky could get a podium, but yeah, she's clearly in good form. I think in an interview with maybe Sports or something, they did ask her about Worlds. And am I incorrect in saying she thought it was going to be good fit for her? I have to find that.
The time trial win is not completely surprising given, how she rode at the end of last year. She, in the CMAC Ladies Tour time trial, she was super strong. But we also just know that she's been gearing up for the track, and so she's got that fitness coming off of the Olympics, and that the Worlds was a huge goal for her. So she's kind of coming into her prime fitness right now in a way.
Has she not been on her prime all season?
Since
yeah,
she's not only pissing off the GC riders, she's now pissing off the time trialists.
Yeah. Imagine being Ellen right now. I mean, Ellen's got her eyes on those rainbow stripes again. Obviously coming off the back of the Olympics disappointment, and is clearly riding well. But yeah, that was the question I was thinking over the weekend. The time trial is this week. So yeah, just 1 week in between, 44-second deficit. I guess we'll talk about the World's TT, but that was just going through my head. I was like, oh, I can see it being another Grace day, to be honest.
Hold on, I'm going to look up the course right now.
Because no Marlon Russa, and I would say maybe Van Dijk or Dijgert. Forgot about Dijgert.
I'm really sad for Russa not being able to compete in her home Worlds. That would be really disappointing.
Yeah, a god-awful year. Hopefully we see her back to her best next year, but that must be really hard. It's in her career, the chance of it coming around again is highly unlikely, right? When was the last time it was in Switzerland? 6 years ago?
Why is the men's time trial 20 kilometers longer than the women's?
20.
I thought we had gone to equal time trials in the last couple of years.
Should both be around the 30-35 mark, I thought.
All right, here's the course. It starts off on a little bit of a tiny bit of an uphill, and then it's pretty fast and flat all the way into a little kicker that's about 800 meters long. Doesn't really descend. It's just kind of a gradual flat bit into a quite decent climb, almost 2 kilometers, but it never really gets over 7%. There's a bit of 8% maybe, but for the most part, it's pretty gradual climbing. And then a really fast descent into another lumpy bit that goes into another really fast descent into a very long stretch, 12-kilometer stretch of just flat, absolute pancake flat. The hilly part is also quite technical. So the descent, the final descent into the flat part is straight, but the descent off of the biggest climb has some switchbacks, and then there's some good turns and stuff in there as well. And the whole flat run into the finish is basically just straight. So once they get through the halfway point or a little bit past the halfway point, it's just flat and straight. A time trialist's absolute dream. But the whole first 15 kilometers, the whole first 17 kilometers is technical and constantly up and down.
How did that compare to last year's? Last year's was a pretty decent time trial. Like the end was really hard, right? From last year, because they had that climb with the cobbles and everything.
I think that looking at this course, it even more feels like it's going to suit Kopecky the way that she's climbing right now, especially because it's the biggest bit of climbing is very steady. And man, I hate to say that I would be surprised if Ellen Van Dijk was able to win this one, but we did see, like, in the Europeans time trial, she really struggled with the opening part of the course that was quite technical when it was on the car racing circuit. She lost most of her time there. And so I think that since there's such a technical section in this course, and also it's going to be really, really hard to find a rhythm for the whole first 17 kilometers because it's just constantly changing in elevation, that a rider like Kopecky, who's way more, who has kind of more in her toolbox, so to say, she'll really excel at a course like this. I think.
And Grace.
Dygert and Grace. Yeah, I think Dygert and Grace will be interesting because the two of them have raced. We haven't seen them like line up in a time trial since the Olympics, and it's very, very, very different from the Olympics course, this one. So it's going to be, yeah, I think for Grace, it looks like a decent course, but I think she's still going to struggle with that climb more so than Kopecky. And with Dygert, man, she races so little that I am really not sure how she will handle that whole section, but she's still just such a strong rider that I think she's going to probably be Kopecky's biggest threat.
Dygert's always a threat. But what I love at the moment, really this year, but definitely the last couple of years, how like exciting time trials have become because we've got so many riders that could win. I've been really enjoying when we get big time trials and the best come out to play, and you don't quite know who's going to win.
Yeah, well, think of the Olympics and some of the riders like that just kept setting the fastest times. Like Lebu had an incredible time trial. Like she can time trial in her own right. But before, I think that's a good point, Gracie. It was like you had basically 2 to 3 riders in your mind, and it was always going to be between those 3. But at these big championship events, like Anna Henderson can't discount someone like that. There's, Lebu, again, a really great performance at the Olympics. Last year, Schweinberger in Glasgow. So you never know what you're really going to get on these championship days. But from what you've said, I still think it could be a really good course for Grace. And we know that this is going to be her last race. So she is just putting everything into this specific event. And clearly Kopecky is on good form. It does suit her, but I still think someone who is a TT specialist can get the edge on the other competitors.
There was a time trial in the tour. I forgot about that. That doesn't count. It was so short.
It's not a time trial. And
it's not a time trial like this. I mean, this one's still not super long. Only 30K, really, 29.9 kilometers. But it's obviously a lot longer than the basically prologue that we had in the stage 3 prologue that we had in the tour. I was trying to think, was there a time trial? I feel like I was thinking there was definitely a time trial between the Olympics and right now. But I just
pretty important one.
Yeah, but it's just because that whole week was such a blur that I forgot that we had a time trial in that race.
And I mean, that was a completely surprising winner, if we're honest.
Yeah, true. And Grace would have won that race if not for the flat. You're right. The time trial for Worlds is this week. We're coming up on Worlds week, which is very exciting. Really means we're getting to the end. And yeah, I think for Kopecky coming off of that Europeans victory, it'll be she's going into the World Championships with a ton of confidence, because obviously Ellen has won multiple World Championship time trials in her career, and Kopecky was well ahead of her, and that's got to give her confidence going into in the road races. All three women's road races, U23 junior and elites, all ended in a bunch sprint. It was a very flat course. There was a couple sections of cobbles and some really mediocre climbs that we saw some attacks on, but in the end, the two biggest teams of the elite race wanted it to be a bunch sprint, and this actual sprint was pretty hectic. A lot of teams, including the Italians and the Dutch, kind of lost their positioning going into the sprint, and it got a little bit chaotic, but Wiebes was able to take that victory over Balsamo, and Daria Pikulik came in for third.
Which is, fantastic performance for the Polish rider, but she's been having really great, strong performances in the sprints throughout this season and seasons before, but I'd say this year's definitely been her strongest. In that sprint finish, it was interesting. It was like, what was the news? I'm trying to think of the news heading in Dutch, but for Wiebes, it was like, what is the word? You know, all the bad luck she had at the Tour de France and things didn't go away and she didn't get a win. And it was like, finally, she got that win. What is the word? Abby,
Redemption.
Redemption. I was thinking of something to do with R, but it was definitely not redemption. It was like redemption for her. And like, if you look at the footage, her and Balsamo basically launched their sprints almost at exactly the same time. And she was just a rocket. She put over a bike length into her. It's like Wiebes of the Wiebes before.
It was an impressive sprint, that pure power when they jump, but like it was definitely messy with between 3 and 2K to go. I think a lot of trains got a bit messed up, including the Italians, but as they came into 1K to go, Balsamo had 3 riders in front of her doing a great lead out, and by that point Wiebes had no one, and she moved herself up in the last kilometer and still had the strength to sprint and just wipe the floor with everybody. So yeah, it was impressive to say the least, and definitely showing everyone that she is the best sprinter in the world at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, obviously she didn't have to go up against Charlotte Kool, who beat her in those sprints in the Tour, especially the second stage, because the Dutch didn't take Kool for this race. But I think given the redemption that Wiebes got, both from the Tour but also from the Europeans last year, where it was kind of an upset when Misha Bredewald stole the victory a bit from her teammate. Wiebes was gunning for that victory as well last year on a slightly different course, having won the race in Munich, and that was another pretty much pure bunch sprint in 2022. This was like double redemption for her, taking back the European jersey. And I think going into like CMAC Ladies Tour, which will be kind of the next big World Tour race, and also usually has a couple pretty good sprint stages in it. It's like with the time trialing, we were saying, the time trialing is getting more exciting because there's more players involved. The same with the sprinting, because now Wiebes is kind of back on top and in the jersey that she was so comfortable in before, but she'll have to go up against Kool and Balsamo again at CMAC Ladies Tour in theory.
And it looks like Balsamo now is back to the level that she was in the spring. So it's really good to see her back up there. And as the commentators were saying in the race, the Italians, just the way that they're so well drilled in championship events, it's always really impressive to watch them. And I'm looking forward to what they can do at the World Championships, actually. Not with Balsamo going for the win, of course, but if Elisa Longo Borghini is where she needs to be, I think it should be a really good fit for them.
They're a team that really knows how to put it together when it comes to a high level event, unlike the Dutch.
And they don't care who wins. Like we've spoken about before, if they go in with a plan and it is for Balsamo, it's for Balsamo and that's it. Like you don't deviate away from that plan. And if for some reason something happens and say a break had gone and there was an Italian in the break and the Italian won, they wouldn't be pissed off that that person took the win or somehow ended up solo, kind of like Bredewald last year. A win is a win for Italy. And they're all just so proud that it doesn't matter who wins as long as someone wins. And I think sometimes that's what's lacking with some of the Dutch riders. Like if they want to win on that day and they don't win on that day, there's not going to be a smile on the podium.
I'll never get Weavis's face on that podium last year out of my mind, just how upset she looked. And I think after the fact, she was happy for Bredewald. Obviously, they're on the same trade team, so the jersey stayed within the team. But it was definitely, last year was definitely a funny moment. Okay, for the junior race, we had the Dutch win as well with Puck Langenberg, and also with the U23s. Sophie van Rooyen won the U23 race ahead of her teammate, actually, Scarlett Soren. So we had a complete Dutch sweep of the women's races with, all three of those races. And it's a bummer that we didn't have the British team in for the U23s, because I think that they could have done a pretty good job. For the elite race, I think it was always going to be Wiebes or Balsamo, although Daria Pikalik did fantastic to finish third. But for the U23 race, I think it could have been a much more dynamic race. But Sophie van Rooyen, she's a rider. She rides for Volker Vessels currently with no contract for next year. Ooh. So a win like this is going to be a pretty big thing to take to teams if she's still on the hunt for a contract for 2025.
Maybe she has one, but just hasn't been announced.
Maybe it's SD Works.
Yeah. Another Dutchie wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a really great chat with Giorgia Bronzini about Daria Pikalik at the tour, actually. And it was a rider she was most excited about because she said she saw a lot of herself in Daria because obviously the track background and then going on the road, and she's really looking forward to how the team is going to develop her over the next few years. And they have like a whole performance plan in place for certain riders and the team in general. So, keep your eyes peeled for Daria because there's a bit more to come.
Did you guys see the kind of talking point that went around this weekend with the potential, the UCI's potential banning of U23 and junior riders with professional contracts from racing in those categories for the future races?
I think that was just under 23.
Could only be, yeah.
But yeah, either way, I think that's still, I don't think that needs to happen for another few years. I think that so many, well, we don't have under 23 races outside of some championships, not including the World Championships, and that'll be the first time in 2025. So you can't expect to have a whole swathe of younger riders that don't have pro contracts, because they pretty much all do, because that's the only way that they can do bike racing. And we're going to have the pro tier come in from next season, but even then it's not going to change a whole lot in that way. So I think that the current rule in place that you just have to pick one category and then you can't change from that. So if you decided as an under 23 rider that you wanted to race in the elites, but you still had another year or two left in under 23s, you can't go back to then race in under 23s the next year. And I think that's fair enough. But I think you still should be able to choose for at least another 2 or 3 years, because women's cycling isn't quite at the level that men's cycling has that huge amount of riders that do, like a lot of those under 23s are doing the Nations Cups and a whole bunch of under 23 only races. Like we just don't have that. So it's like the under 23 women's race would have hardly anyone in it if they brought in the rule that you couldn't race if you had a pro contract.
Yeah, that's a great point. And with the men, is that still the case that you can choose to race your under 23 category even if you have a pro contract, or is that away now?
I'm not
World
sure.
Tour contract. It used to
Yeah, I
be
think World Tour.
World Tour. Yeah.
I think they're toying with implementing that rule in the future, but it's not in place currently for the men or the women.
Yeah. I think the men are there. Like if you're a U23 and you have a World Tour contract, then leave it for the guys that don't. But definitely not for the women.
Yeah, we just don't have the numbers yet to be able to put that rule in place. Same with like Lavinier, for example. A lot of the top riders at Lavinier are World Tour riders, but there's so few of those races in the first place that it doesn't really make sense for riders to only target U23 races. Once we have like a full U23 calendar and teams that are more centered around U23 racing specifically, then yeah, that rule can totally be in place, but we're just not there. We've only got like 4 specific U23 races, I think.
I wonder if there'll be that. There was talk there would be a U23 Paris-Roubaix this year. It didn't happen.
I think next year.
Curious to see if that actually happens.
But there's just not many opportunities on the U23 side. And I mean, still a lot of the U23 riders that have professional contracts, World Tour contracts, are not like leaders on their teams. They still don't, unless it's like Shirin Van Anrooy. She's kind of a outlier, I guess, but there's a couple of them. But for the most part, the U23 riders who race in the World Tour are still developing and thus spend a lot of time in a domestique role. So they still don't get to go for the win very often, and getting the few opportunities to go for that victory, like in the Europeans. And next year, the World Championships. It would be a real shame if we had the first ever women's U23 race and it was like 30 riders because none of the World Tour riders could line up.
They surely can't. They won't do that. It would be a major flop for the UCI. No?
I mean, it's the UCI though.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't think these things through. Well, the last piece of news that happened this weekend was Lael Wilcox finished her around the world trip. Loren got to ride with her when she rode through Belgium. She finished in 108 days, 12 hours, and 12 minutes, 2 weeks faster than Jenny Graham from 2018, setting a new Guinness World Record.
Like 2 weeks is massive. I mean, a day would have been huge. But 2 weeks is, I don't know who's going to go out there and try and break this next. But I think that's going to stand for quite a while.
She'll probably go try to break her own record in like 2 years.
Probably. But like Abby mentioned, I did get to ride with her, and I was lucky enough to actually sit on the front for 2 hours with her. I don't know why, but the group I was riding with were slightly intimidated, but maybe also because English isn't their first language, but they're really competent English speaking people. So maybe it was just, I don't know, they were starstruck by Lyle, and she's such a wonderful human being. And I can see how she managed to do this just from a mental point of view, but also physically. Like, I rode with her 2 hours, and the pace that she was pushing, she just puts it in a massive gear and like churns it over. But it was impressive to think that she was riding at that pace for 108 days and 12 hours and 12 minutes. It was unbelievable. You're talking about like a phenomenal athlete, not just some person. I think I always had this idea of that people who can do these sort of feats, it's just all mental. She did say like 80% of it is just mental, but they are like real physical specimens. So yeah, it was super, super cool experience for sure. And
What
there were
did you
quite a
talk
few.
about with her?
Talked about life. She just wanted to hear people's stories. And I think because so many people came out to meet her, for her, it wasn't so interesting to keep talking about herself. And a lot of people know stuff about Lyle, but yeah, she just asked me all the questions, like how did an Aussie end up here in Belgium? So then we ended up just talking about life in general. And yeah, how I ended up here was a big talking point. And then we touched on cycling and women's sport and the development of that side of things, and how she's not really in touch with the competitive stuff that like we relate to. And then she talked all about just the people that she met, and that was the biggest thing for her, was just all the interesting stories and all the different individuals that came out to meet her on the road and brought her all different types of foods. I brought her a rice tart, because that's, like I said to her, this is a theme when I was racing. Like, it was such a treat if the Swannies went and bought fresh rice tart and cut it up in little squares, and then in your back pocket in the spring when the racing can be pretty terrible at points, you pull out like a little golden nugget of rice tart.
That's cool.
So it was all like those little tiny, those small stories that we were just exchanging. And she grew up in Alaska. So I told her about that, I think the Kristen Hanna book, Abby. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know much about Alaska, but everything I know is from this book. And I told her about the book. And like, she's like, yeah, that's pretty much what it's like living up there. But she's just an incredible bubble of energy, and just has this childlike curiosity to her, which was really beautiful.
I bet she met so many cool people along the way. I mean, she had so many people ride with her in almost everywhere she was. But I bet like the sights that she saw and the people that she met, that she'll just have stories for the rest of time about the whole experience.
Well, she did the daily podcast, just like 10-minute little sound bites, and she spoke about who she met that day. I got a little shout out there. That was my one claim to fame. The young Australian woman, young being the key. So if you want to go back and listen to those, there's 108 episodes of 10 minutes.
I'm sure she'll do a longer one also now.
They're making a documentary, a full length.
Let's wrap it up. When we come back next week, we'll talk about the time trial. I am obsessed with Gilmore Girls.
Oh, that's a good one.
I've been obsessed with Gilmore Girls since I was in high school, but something about the seasons changing and it getting colder and sweater weather made me want to start from the pilot. And man, this show is just so good. Some of the jokes definitely do not hold up, but it's just such a phenomenal show. And it's really funny watching it. I don't think I've actually watched it since having Lila, and watching it now, like as a mom, it's such a different perspective.
Yeah, I love the dialogue, but I can imagine how dated it would be. And maybe I'll go back and watch that too. I used to watch it when I lived in Italy, and it was like the one show that one of the many ride channels showed in English, because in Italy, pretty much they dub everything in Italian. And so when I didn't speak much Italian and I didn't have very good internet and Netflix wasn't even a thing back then.
Nope.
I would just like I'd have to like get burned or like get hard drives full of stuff from other people. But if I'd run out of stuff, I'd like try and time it that I'd watch Gilmore Girls at a specific time of the day in Italy.
That's amazing. I remember going to a race once, actually, like pre Netflix streaming. Like it was still, I think, when you could get Netflix on, or no, there was no Wi-Fi. So we were at this race and it was Tour de Gila. So you stayed in like host
Silver
housing.
City.
And our host housing was the nuns' quarters of a church. And there was like no Wi-Fi, no service, nothing. And so I was like rummaging around the nuns' library and I found every season of The Vicar of Dibley on DVD.
Oh, that's a good one too.
I watched that for like a full week. Like I just watched every season and then I started it again for like a week straight. And it was just so joyful.
That is a very good show.
I feel like everyone has like a weird healer story.
Probably.
Yeah.
I have some serious stories. One time we stayed with this woman who, I say stayed with, we walked into her house and we were like, we can't stay here. And my parents were luckily at the race, and they managed to get accommodation for like the 4 girls that were supposed to stay at that host house. But we had like one rider from Austria who'd never been to the US before. And her first experience was walking into this house of this woman who she ran like a retreat for women who had kind of just, I don't know how to phrase it, like newly discovered lesbians.
Oh,
A retreat.
I didn't think it
for
was
them
going
to
that
find
way.
their sexuality.
Uh,
And so there was like a lot of beds all over the place.
Oh my God.
And
I stayed in that house.
the one where you weren't allowed to use the kitchen.
Beds. No, we weren't allowed to.
Yeah, like she wouldn't let you touch anything in the
No.
kitchen.
I
And
didn't know she was part of
Astrid
this
walked into her room, and it was an entire library of like sexual awakening books for lesbians. And Astrid was just like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah. I stayed in that house.
Oh my God, we didn't stay there. We were like, we walked in the kitchen, and she was like, "You can't touch any of the pots and pans or knives or forks or silverware. Here, you each get one plastic fork and a plastic bowl." And I was like, "No."
No. I stayed there.
That was hilarious.
Yeah, we'll have to exchange stories off mic. That was one of my weirdest.
I can't believe there's another person on this planet who knows about this other than poor Astrid.
I think there was like the whole team of us slept in that room with all the beds.
Oh my God. And it was so far out of town too.
Yeah. Memories of Gila. Great times. The crit was fun.
The crit was super fun.
Yeah.
Minus those cracks on the back stretch.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. Anyway, obsessions?
You go, Gracie.
I don't know. I'm still just in the new mum fog, but I still haven't picked up a book yet. I'll get there. I'm still watching lots of TV. And we're currently watching a show called Truth Be Told. And I think it's based off a book, but it's kind of set in podcast episodes in a way. And it's like a bit true crimey, but it's not actual true crime, because I've gone off actual true crime because I think it's like kind of awful now, even though I used to listen to it a lot. So it's kind of like scratches that little itch without it being actually real. So it's quite good, and it's got a good cast. And I think it's on Apple.
Oh, actually, Tom's and I watched that show because we have a friend who was in it.
Oh, really?
He was only in a couple episodes.
Oh, it's got the guy from Breaking Bad and Kate Hudson.
Aaron Paul.
Yeah.
Not Kate Hudson.
Kate Hudson is in
a bunch of other.
I think she's either in the second season or she's a producer.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And I think Reese Witherspoon is a producer, which is always a good sign that it's a good booked TV thing.
Yeah, she's been behind quite a few of like my favorite new series that have come out, books to TV. I guess that comes from her book club, huh? She's got good insight.
If I can go off a quick tangent, she has got a brilliant business model. So she has the book club, and what she does is she gives authors exposure through the book club, but the contract is that she then gets the rights to make TV or movies out of those books. So she makes heaps of money.
And she can see what's popular, so she knows what to produce then as well.
Exactly.
Smart
very
woman.
Clever lady.
Yeah, she is. Cool. Well, my obsession, I'm obsessed with our bike trailer. We've had 1 week and we're having like the most fun with it. Louis is such a huge baby that he is like almost the size of a 1-year-old child. So he fits really nice into the seat of the bike trailer and he can sit. So as soon as we did like a quick little tour 2 weekends ago, just to Bruges, to the markets and the playground to make sure he was all cool with it. And he absolutely loved it because he was giggling and roaring like a lion. So then yesterday or Saturday, we decided to do like a 30-kilometer bike tour to one of the forests surrounding Bruges. And I packed a pancake picnic for us and we just had like the best time. And it was nice for Hannes and I to to get out and get some exercise. And I think the last time Hannes and I went cycling together was probably when we just had Harry 3 years ago. So it's been a long time since we did something like that. So yeah, I'm obsessed with that. It's really fun to go on adventures with the kids, and it's bringing like a new sort of joy and life to life on the bike.
Love it.
I loved
That's so
your
good.
photos from the weekend.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And it's so cute having the two of them in the trailer. Like Hannes was, I was riding the bike with the kids behind me, and he kept sort of rolling up to see what was going on. And there were like times where like they were just giving each other kisses. They're very affectionate children. So that was really cute. Yeah. So it was a really wholesome weekend, and I hope we have more of those, even though the weather is already turning to shit here.
Well, we'll be back next week. Thanks everyone for listening. Have a good weekend. Enjoy the World Championship time trial.
How's it Worlds already? Where did the season go? Like it was both long, but then also kind of strange that we're here already. I don't know. What a whirlwind of a year.
It's like being a rider, you're always like, what?